I have never told anyone the full truth about what happened inside that house. The police know part of it. My parents know even less. Even my wife believes I only spent one night there. The truth is that I went back 6 times, and by the 6th night, I understood why the previous owner had left almost everything behind. This happened when I was 23. I had just finished college and taken a temporary job with a property management company. Most of the work was boring. I changed locks, photographed empty rooms, checked for water damage, and made sure abandoned properties were secure before they were listed for sale. The company handled foreclosures, inherited homes, and houses where the owners had died. Usually, I worked alone. I liked that. I was young, broke, and willing to take whatever hours they gave me. The house was about 40 minutes outside town, at the end of a narrow road surrounded by trees. There were no nearby neighbors. The closest house was probably half a mile away, hidden behind a line of pines. My supervisor, Mark, handed me the keys and said the property had been empty for almost 8 months. The owner had disappeared, not died, not officially moved. He had simply stopped paying his mortgage, stopped answering calls, and vanished. His name was Walter Green. He was 61 and lived alone. The bank eventually took possession of the house. My job was to photograph every room, check the pipes, replace the front lock, and make a list of anything valuable left inside. Mark warned me the electricity had been shut off. He also said the previous inspector had refused to finish the job. When I asked why, he laughed and said the guy was probably afraid of mice. I arrived a little after 3 in the afternoon. The sky was overcast, but it had not started raining yet. The road leading to the house narrowed during the final mile until branches scraped both sides of my car. There were no streetlights, no mailboxes, and no signs marking the property. I almost drove past it. The house stood behind an overgrown front yard, partially hidden by tall grass and dead bushes. It was larger than I expected. 2 stories, white siding, dark shutters, and a detached garage that leaned slightly to one side. Nothing about it looked frightening. It just looked neglected. The grass had grown almost to my knees, and weeds covered the walkway. A rusted bicycle lay beside the garage. One of the upstairs curtains moved slightly behind a closed window. I noticed that before I got out of the car. There was no wind. I sat there for a few seconds, watching the curtain. It did not move again. I told myself it had probably shifted when I pulled into the driveway. The front door opened without resistance. The air inside smelled stale, like dust, old fabric, and something faintly metallic. I expected the place to be empty. It wasn't. Almost everything was still there. Furniture, clothes, dishes in the cabinets, a television, books, a half-finished puzzle on the dining table. There were even shoes beside the front door. It looked as if Walter had stepped outside and never returned. The only thing that seemed unusual was the silence. Old houses usually make noise. Pipes knock. Wood shifts. Wind moves through cracks. That house seemed to absorb sound. Even my footsteps felt muted. I called out before going farther inside, not because I expected an answer. It was something I always did when entering a property that had been vacant for a while. Sometimes squatters moved in. Sometimes teenagers broke through a basement window. Sometimes the owner had never really left. "Property management," I said. "Is anyone here?" My voice sounded smaller than it should have. There was no response. I started downstairs. The kitchen was dirty but not destroyed. There was a mug in the sink with a dark ring dried inside it. A plate sat beside it with something hardened onto the surface. The refrigerator had been emptied, but one cabinet still contained canned soup, pasta, and a box of crackers. The expiration dates were recent. That seemed strange. If the house had truly been empty for 8 months, the food should have been older. I photographed it anyway. In the living room, a blanket was folded neatly over the couch. A pair of reading glasses sat on the coffee table beside a paperback novel. The book was open. Not just lying open. It had been placed face down, as if someone had stopped in the middle of a page. I picked it up. The spine cracked softly. A sentence had been underlined in pencil. I no longer remember the exact wording, but it was something about being observed by someone you could not see. At the time, I thought it was an odd coincidence. I placed the book back exactly where I found it. On the wall above the fireplace was a family photograph. Walter stood beside a woman and 2 children, 1 boy and 1 girl. The picture looked old. The children were probably in their 20s now. Walter's face had been scratched out. Not the others. Only his. The marks were deep enough to cut through the photograph and into the cardboard backing. I took a close-up picture. Then I checked the rest of the room. The television was old but expensive. The drawers beneath it contained DVDs, remote controls, and several blank VHS tapes. One tape had a white label with a single handwritten word. Bedroom. I turned it over. No date. No other information. There was no VCR connected to the television, so I put the tape back. Later, I would wish I had taken it with me. The dining room was directly behind the living room. The puzzle on the table showed a winter landscape. Most of it had been completed except for the center, where a dark house should have been. The missing pieces were arranged in a straight line along the edge of the table. Every single one had been turned face down. There were 32 of them. I counted. I do not know why. I photographed the room and continued upstairs. The staircase creaked beneath my weight. Halfway up, I noticed a narrow door built into the wall. It looked like a shallow linen closet. The handle turned, but the door opened only a few inches before something blocked it from the other side. I shined my flashlight through the gap. There were shelves inside, stacked with folded towels and blankets. Nothing unusual. I pushed harder. The obstruction did not move. I decided to check it later. Upstairs, I found 2 bedrooms and a small office. The master bedroom looked used. The bed was unmade. A shirt hung over the back of a chair. There were 3 prescription bottles on the nightstand, all dated within the month Walter disappeared. One was for blood pressure. One was for sleep. The 3rd label had been removed. The cap was lying on the floor. I looked inside. The bottle was empty. There was also an alarm clock on the nightstand. It had stopped at 2:17. I photographed the clock, the medication, and the bed. Then I opened the closet. Walter's clothes still hung inside. Coats, button-down shirts, 2 suits. A pair of polished black shoes sat on the floor. Behind them, I noticed a rectangular section of carpet that was cleaner than the rest. Something heavy had been sitting there for years and had recently been removed. There were drag marks leading from the closet into the bedroom. They ended beside the bed. Whatever had been there was gone. The second bedroom was different. It was completely empty. No furniture, no curtains, no carpet, just bare wooden floorboards and a single metal chair in the center of the room. The chair faced the wall. I remember standing in the doorway and feeling uncomfortable before I even understood why. The rest of the house looked frozen in time. This room looked prepared. The chair was not dusty. Everything else was. There were deep scratches beneath the chair legs. Not random scratches, 2 parallel grooves, as if the chair had repeatedly been dragged forward and backward in exactly the same place. The wall in front of it had been repainted. The rest of the room was a faded cream color. That section was bright white, a perfect rectangle, slightly wider than the chair. I stepped closer and ran my fingers across the paint. It felt rough. Several layers had been applied over something. There was a faint shape beneath the surface. Long, vertical, almost like writing. I took a few pictures and moved on. The office was locked. The keyring Mark gave me had 7 keys, but none opened it. I tried them twice. One key entered the lock but would not turn. I could have forced the door, but the frame looked old, and I did not want to damage it. As I stepped away, I heard something from inside. A soft tapping sound. 3 taps. A pause. Then 3 more. I leaned closer. Nothing. I knocked once on the door. The tapping stopped. I waited. After several seconds, something scraped slowly across the floor inside the office. It sounded heavy, like a chair being pulled away from the door. I called out again. No answer. My first thought was that an animal might be trapped inside. A raccoon, a squirrel, maybe even a bird. But the sound had been too controlled. I put my ear against the door. The room was silent. I told myself I would find the key in the basement. Then I went downstairs. By then, it was almost 5. The light outside was fading faster than I expected. Rain tapped lightly against the kitchen windows. I still had to inspect the basement. The basement door was in the kitchen. When I opened it, a cold smell came up from below. Not mold. Something metallic. Something like wet coins. The stairs descended into complete darkness. I turned on my flashlight and called out. Again, no response. I started down. The basement was unfinished. Concrete walls, exposed pipes, shelves filled with jars, paint cans, tools, and old newspapers. The floor was damp in several places. At the far end was a workbench. Above it hung dozens of keys. Each key had a small paper label tied to it. Most labels had room names written on them: kitchen, garage, front door, shed, office. But several labels had names: Daniel, Susan, Megan, Thomas, Laura. Some names appeared more than once. I assumed they were relatives or previous tenants. The office key hung near the center. I took it down and put it in my pocket. Beside the workbench was a corkboard covered with yellowed newspaper clippings. Most were local stories: missing pets, burglary reports, a woman who disappeared while jogging, a teenager who never came home from work. The dates covered more than 15 years. Certain words had been circled in red ink: alone, unseen, no witnesses, no forced entry. I stood there reading until the beam of my flashlight began to shake. Then I noticed the photographs pinned beneath the clippings. They showed houses. Not this house. Other homes. Some were taken during the day, others at night. In several pictures, lights were visible through windows. One showed a woman standing in a kitchen. Another showed a child sleeping on a couch. The photographs had been taken from outside, from far enough away that the people inside probably had no idea anyone was watching them. I stepped back from the corkboard. That was when something moved beneath the basement stairs. A quick, soft sound. Fabric against concrete. I swung the flashlight toward it. There was a door under the stairs. It was only about 4 feet tall, the kind of storage space where people keep holiday decorations. The door was closed. I walked toward it slowly. The key ring did not contain anything that fit the lock. I crouched and put my hand against the wood. It was cold, colder than the basement wall. I heard a sound from the other side. Breathing. Very faint. One slow inhale, then silence. I jerked my hand back. Hello? Nothing. I waited. No movement. No second breath. I told myself it was air moving through a pipe. I wrote the locked space down on my inspection sheet and returned upstairs. The office key worked. The door opened inward. Inside, the room was packed with file boxes. The desk was covered with notebooks. The air smelled strongly of cigarette smoke. At first, I thought Walter had run some kind of business from home. Then I opened the first notebook. Every page contained dates and times. 6:12 a.m., bathroom light. 6:34 a.m., kitchen. 7:02 a.m., vehicle left. 5:49 p.m., vehicle returned. 11:18 p.m., bedroom light off. The entries continued for months. There were no explanations, just observations. I opened another notebook. Same format, different times, different handwriting pressure, but clearly the same person. Then I noticed addresses written inside the covers. None of them matched Walter's house. There were at least 12 notebooks, each connected to a different address. Some entries were more detailed. Woman left alone. Boy returned from school at 3:41. Dog remained outside until 10:06. Bedroom window does not lock. The final pages of one notebook were filled with a single sentence written over and over. He saw me looking. He saw me looking. He saw me looking. The handwriting became larger and less controlled until it covered the entire page. I closed the notebook. My hands were sweating. I started opening the file boxes. They were filled with photographs, hundreds of them. People leaving houses, people walking dogs, children waiting for school buses. Women carrying groceries, men mowing lawns. Most had been taken from a distance. Some were shot through windows. Every photograph had a date written on the back. A few had short notes. Lives alone. Returns late on Thursdays. Back door sometimes unlocked. Dog does not bark at night. One box contained only pictures of the same family. A mother, a father, 2 children. The photographs covered several years. The children grew older from one stack to the next. In the earliest pictures, the younger child was still in a stroller. In the last one, she looked about 12. I recognized the family. They were the people in the framed photograph above the fireplace. Walter's wife and children. I looked more closely. The pictures had been taken from outside their home, through windows, from behind trees, from inside parked cars. Walter had not been photographing strangers. He had been watching his own family, or someone had been watching them for him. I found another envelope at the bottom of the box. Inside were pictures of Walter himself. He was standing outside the house, walking to his car, taking out the garbage, closing his bedroom curtains. The photographs had been taken from the surrounding woods. Someone else had been watching him. The dates were from the final month before he disappeared. The last photograph showed Walter standing in the empty upstairs bedroom. The metal chair was behind him. He was not looking at the camera. He was looking at the white section of wall. A shadow stretched across the floor beside him. The shadow was too tall to belong to Walter. There was nobody else visible in the room. On the back, someone had written, "He finally sat down." I felt sick. Whatever Walter had been doing, it was not harmless. And whatever had been watching Walter might still be there. I took pictures of the notebooks and boxes. Then I called Mark. He did not answer. I left a message saying we might need to contact the police. While I was waiting, I heard something upstairs, a single creak, then another, slow, heavy, directly above the office. I froze. I had been alone in empty houses before. Animals get inside, branches hit roofs, old wood settles, but this sounded like a person taking careful steps across the second floor. One step, pause. Another step, pause. The sound moved from the master bedroom toward the empty room. I walked into the hallway and listened. Nothing. I called out, no answer. My phone showed no signal. That had not happened earlier. I checked the front door, still closed, still locked. I went upstairs slowly. Each stair creaked beneath me. The hallway was empty. I checked the master bedroom first. Nothing had changed. Then I walked toward the empty room. The metal chair had moved. I was sure of it. When I first saw it, the front legs were inside the darker scratches on the floor. Now the chair sat several inches closer to the wall. I told myself I had remembered it wrong. I took another picture anyway. Then I noticed something beside the rear leg. A cigarette. It had been crushed against the floor. A thin line of smoke still rose from the filter. I stared at it. The smell in the office. The tapping. The footsteps. Someone was inside the house. I backed into the hallway. "Listen," I said loudly. "I'm leaving. I don't want any trouble." The closet door in the master bedroom opened. Not quickly. It moved about an inch, then stopped. I ran downstairs. As I reached the front door, something struck the wall behind me, hard enough to shake the framed family photograph. The picture fell from its hook and shattered on the floor. I did not turn around. I unlocked the door, ran to my car, and drove away. For the first 10 minutes, I kept checking the rearview mirror. The road behind me was empty. When I reached the highway, my phone regained signal. Mark called almost immediately. I answered and told him everything. The notebooks, the photographs, the footsteps, the cigarette. There was a long pause. Then he said, "Did you open the room under the stairs?" I told him no. He sounded relieved. I asked why. He said the first inspector had mentioned it too. According to Mark, the man had called from the property in a panic, saying someone was trapped inside the basement wall. By the time Mark arrived, the inspector was gone. He left his tools and paperwork behind. He quit the next morning. I asked whether the police had searched the house. Mark said they had. Months earlier, they found nothing criminal. No body, no hidden person, no evidence that Walter had been harming anyone. He said the notebooks probably belonged to a private investigator. I knew that was not true. Private investigators do not photograph children through bedroom windows. But Mark did not want to hear it. He told me to upload the pictures, finish the report, and return the next day with another employee. I should have refused. I should have driven straight to the police station. Instead, I went home. That night, I reviewed the photographs on my laptop. Most were normal. The rooms, the furniture, the notebooks, the boxes. But several files were corrupted. Gray blocks covered parts of the images. Faces were stretched. Rooms appeared darker than they had been. Then I opened the second picture of the metal chair. Something was visible behind it. At first, I thought it was a shadow. Then I zoomed in. 2 dark trouser legs stood against the wall behind the chair. Black shoes. The upper body was outside the frame. I had not seen anyone there. I checked the earlier picture. The legs were not present. Then I noticed something worse. In the second photograph, the chair was not facing the wall anymore. It was turned slightly toward the camera. Only a few degrees. Just enough that someone sitting in it would have been looking directly at me. The next morning, Mark insisted I return with another employee. His name was Kyle. He laughed through the entire drive, convinced I had scared myself in an old house. That stopped the moment we entered. The notebooks were gone. The boxes of photographs were empty. Even the cigarette I'd found upstairs had disappeared. Kyle thought I was exaggerating until I showed him the picture on my phone. Behind the metal chair, 2 legs were clearly visible. Someone had been standing there when I took the photo. Neither of us remembered seeing anyone. We went straight to the basement. The small door beneath the stairs was still locked. Kyle forced it open with a pry bar. Behind it was a narrow crawl space leading to a hidden room. Inside sat a dirty mattress, empty food cans, bottled water, and dozens of photographs pinned to the wall. Most of them were of me. Me unlocking the front door. Me standing in the kitchen. Me reading the notebooks. Me leaving the house. Every photograph had been taken from inside the property while I believed I was alone. Kyle whispered, "Someone has been living here." The moment he finished speaking, footsteps crossed the kitchen above us. Slow, deliberate. Neither of us moved. A man coughed once, then silence. A few seconds later, the basement door opened by itself. We ran. Neither of us looked back. Kyle refused to ever return. I should have listened. Instead, I became obsessed. Over the next week, I visited the property 4 more times. Each visit brought something new. Fresh food appeared in the refrigerator, even though the power had been disconnected for months. The dead kitchen clock displayed a different time every day. The blanket on the couch changed position. One afternoon, I found an old cassette recorder on the office desk. The tape contained less than 20 seconds of audio. A calm voice said, "He's back." Another voice replied, "Not yet." Then the recording ended. When I rewound the tape, it was completely blank. No voices, only static. The final visit happened after sunset. I parked down the road and watched the house from the trees. Around midnight, a light appeared in the empty upstairs bedroom. Someone was sitting in the metal chair. The figure never moved. After several minutes, it slowly lifted one arm and pointed toward the front door. At that exact moment, the front door opened. A tall man stepped outside. He stood perfectly still before turning toward the woods, toward me. Even from that distance, I knew he had seen me. I ran. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Not running, walking. Always the same distance behind me. When I reached my car, I locked the doors and drove without looking back. Only after reaching the highway did I notice a small key lying on the passenger seat. A paper tag was tied to it. My name was written on the label. The police searched the property the next morning. They found nothing. No hidden room, no mattress, no photographs, nothing. The house was sold a few months later to a young family. I almost warned them. Instead, I convinced myself I had imagined more than I realized. 3 months later, I saw a post from the new owner in a local community group. She asked whether anyone knew the history of the house. Her young daughter kept waking up every night, insisting there was a man sitting in the empty bedroom upstairs. People told her children imagined things. Then the mother added one sentence that made me close my laptop. Her daughter said the man never spoke. He only sat in a metal chair facing the wall. And every morning, the chair was a little closer to her bedroom door.